Hello, I am Susan Crowther. I'm with the Alabama Department of Education. I am one of the Associate General Counsels with the department. My primary responsibility is prosecuting certification cases. So this is an administrative case that we would have against an educator who has committed acts of misconduct. And that process is set out by law. I'm going to talk about the laws that apply to those situations, but I'm also going to talk about preventative measures. So first of all, I want to give a brief history of the background review process for teachers. So in 1999, the Child Protection Act was passed, and what this does is it authorizes us as a department that has teachers that we know will have unsupervised access to children. It authorizes us to have background checks conducted on teachers. Previously, though, this was only done when there was some sort of suspicion that something had happened, that maybe some sort of criminal act had occurred. So we did not background check everyone. In 2002, the law was changed so that there was a mandatory background check for all teachers. This was as a result of finding out that there was a teacher working in a school system who had committed a crime that put them on what we call the predator list, where they're required to report every time they move to a new community. So because of that, we realized we needed to go ahead and background check all teachers. So that process began in 2002. In 2009, there was the requirement added so that we could also background check those who were in teacher education programs, because we felt like, number one, those individuals would be around students, so there was still the same risk, and we needed to make sure that they didn't have any crimes in their past that involved harming students. But also, we wanted to make sure that we weren't wasting their time. So if they wouldn't pass the background check for that purpose, we knew they would not pass it once they decided to become a teacher. So we started doing that background check in that year. So in March of 2010, Act 2010-264 went into effect. And so this was a provision that allows for an automatic revocation of a certificate if the individual has been convicted of a crime that would be like a Class A felony or any crime that involved sexual harm to a child. And then in July of 2010, Act 2010-497 went into effect. It criminalizes sexual misconduct between a school employee and a student under the age of 19. This is the law that you hear a lot about when you see arrests for teachers having sexual relations with a student. And in January of 2011, we made some changes to our administrative code rule that emphasize the requirement for local superintendents to report employment action as a result of educator misconduct. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. So inappropriate teacher-student relationships. This is something that is awful when this occurs. It is a violation of the trust of that student, and it is a situation where the teacher is in a position of authority over that student, and they have done the worst thing. They ruin that child's life, and ultimately it can ruin the teacher's life as well.
When a parent, student, community member, or other stakeholder enters a campus, it is reasonable for him or her to expect that students are here to learn and teachers are here to teach. It is also reasonable for anyone to be assured that student safety is a priority. Unfortunately, in the state of Alabama, we are experiencing significant ethical violations where teachers cross personal boundaries with students, often leading to the loss of teaching certificates, criminal convictions, and most importantly, students being hurt. Some boundaries are crossed intentionally and overtly, while other boundaries are crossed unknowingly and without premeditation. It is important to build professional relationships that foster academic success with our students. However, there are guidelines that should be followed to ensure appropriate boundaries are in place at all times.
All right, next class. Let's get a move on. Good to see you. Miss Taylor, how are you doing today? Excellent, excellent. It is Wednesday. We're halfway through the week. Are you excited? How's it going, buddy? Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, all right. Hey, almost there. How you doing today? Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, looks like we got one more to go. Have a good one, Miss Taylor. And that brings another great class to an end. You guys, I hope you end up learning as much in your next class as you did in this one. It was fun for me. Enjoy, enjoy. Hey, hold up a second. I'd like to talk to you.
Sure, what do you need?
Well, I just wanted to let you know that you did a really great job in class today. And your reward is this. If you need any help with your assignments whatsoever, you just let me know, okay? Anytime.
Thanks, Mr. Good. I think I'm okay. Miss Taylor, can I talk to you?
Sure, what's up?
May I shut the door?
Let's leave it open, but we can move over here to talk.
Miss Taylor, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but I'm feeling really uncomfortable about something. If I tell you, can you promise not to say anything?
I want you to feel comfortable talking to me, but you know I can't promise anything like that. Why don't you take a deep breath and tell me what's going on?
Well, every day when I come into Mr. Good's classroom, he's very touchy-feely with me. It started out sort of okay with high fives and shaking my hand, but now every day he gives me a hug or puts his hand sort of on my butt. Well, maybe more like my lower back, but feels like he's going lower and lower every day. It's getting to the point where I don't want to go to his class anymore. He's constantly giving me candy and cookies, and it's so creepy. I'm also embarrassed because some of the other students are starting to notice what he's doing. I really don't want to get him in trouble, but what should I do?
I appreciate you talking to me about this. I'm sure this must be difficult for you. Have you talked to your parents about this?
No, my mom would have a fit and make a huge scene. I really don't want to tell them.
But this is a big deal. You're gonna have to talk to your parents. But first, we're gonna go talk to the principal. Come on, we'll go together.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Good. I've asked our assistant principal to sit in this meeting. Do you know why I've asked you here today?
No, I do not. What's going on?
Tell me about the types of relationships you have with your students.
Well, you know, I'd like to think that I've got great relationships with the students. They really seem to like me. They seem to connect with me. Some more than others, of course, but all in all, I'd say I'm pretty popular with the kids.
And what are some of the strategies you use to build relationships with your students?
Well, I like to connect with them. I joke with them. I'll reward them. At the end of the day, I like to be more of a friend to them.
Mr. Good, we are not here to be their friend. You are their teacher. You're a professional, not an equal.
Sorry, I'm confused here. Have I done something wrong?
Well, that's yet to be determined. Tell me, would you say you honor the personal space of your students?
Oh, come on now. You guys know me. I'm just a touchy-feely kind of guy. I'm more like a teddy bear when it comes to these kids. Sure, I hug them and let them know that I care, but I would never do anything to hurt one of these kids.
Have you given gifts to any of your students?
No gifts. Maybe cookies and candies from time to time, but cookies and candies aren't gifts, right?
And it's done for the entire group or individual students?
Hey, now, you know, if a kid does really good in class, I might reward them with a candy bar or something. I mean, come on, where's this really going?
Mr. Good, there's been a complaint concerning a violation of a student's personal space. This has caused the student to be uncomfortable around you. The student doesn't want you touching her. She indicated that you frequently hug her and give her gifts. She even said that you continuously place your hand on her lower back near her buttocks area.
Oh, my goodness. Look, I know exactly which student complained. I was just trying to be nice to her. She's a sweet kid. I had no idea that my behavior was making her feel uncomfortable. Look, I hug her and I praise her from time to time, but it was never done in a bad way.
This is a very serious complaint. And it's my responsibility to not only address the situation, but to document your behavior and report the incident to central office.
What do you mean?
Ethical violations could lead to the loss of your teaching certification, as well as possible criminal prosecution. Mr. Good, do you understand the seriousness of this complaint?
Well, I do now. I wish she had said something. I would have stopped.
Sir, it's not her responsibility to tell you. Before you go, it's important for you to know that I will be providing you within 24 hours of written documentation that's going to be placed in your file. And I will notify central office of the complaint lodged against you. And at that time, a determination will be made regarding additional steps that will need to be addressed. An outside investigation could be part of your near future. This concludes the meeting.
You're too old for me, so don't put your arm around my waist. Don't act like you don't know what I'm saying, 'cause you know I'm not playing. We know your secret, your dirty little secret. It's been going on for years. It's passed down from ear to ear. It's time you got caught, and now we want you to stop. You made us feel dirty inside. It's a secret you can't deny. Please stop before it gets out of hand, 'cause it's a situation we can't stand.
As you can see, the ramifications are significant. Using good judgment and keeping current with state laws and district policies will provide a deeper understanding of the responsibility of all educators in the state of Alabama. Don't become a statistic. Don't jeopardize your certification and your future. And don't find yourself involved in a criminal investigation.
So this has been a growing problem. You've probably seen the news reports where they talk about that Alabama leads the entire nation in the number of these cases. And unfortunately, if you do look at the per capita count, that in fact does appear to be true. Texas leads us in pure numbers, but in Alabama, if you look at our population, which of course is significantly less than Texas, in comparison to how many of these things occur, then you will see that in fact we have more of those. So the question that some people ask, well, why is this happening more in Alabama? One of the things that we think is causing that is that we do have this law that I just talked about that criminalizes these relationships, inappropriate relationships between teachers and students where there's a sexual relationship that has occurred. So not all states have that, and I will say that once that was passed, we saw a significant increase in the reports to us of inappropriate sexual relationships between teachers and students. So we feel like that is part of the reason why Alabama is getting so much attention. But also every time there's one of these cases, of course it makes the news. And the reports that talk about that we have more per capita than Texas was based on news reports. So how are we going to combat the problem? So Alabama has a statute, 1623-5, which authorizes us to revoke certificates when a teacher has been guilty of immoral conduct or unbecoming or indecent behavior. I will say briefly that there's some case law that kind of defines what those things are. I know that sounds kind of vague, but we apply certain factors anytime that we look at a case. How long ago did the misconduct occur? How serious was it? Did it involve a child or a fellow teacher? And so we go through all those factors in looking at it. But I'm going to focus for this presentation on the sexual relationships. So one example of immoral or unbecoming or indecent behavior is an educator should always maintain a professional relationship with all students both in and outside of the classroom. That's required by our Alabama Educator Code of Ethics, and when they violate that, that is, again, an immoral conduct or unbecoming or indecent behavior. So some of these I discussed earlier, but 2010-264 is for the immediate revocations for certain offenses. 2010-497, as I mentioned, was the one that criminalizes sexual activity between a teacher and student. 2016-354 is, in addition to the law I just mentioned, this one is where it criminalizes teachers what we call sexting students when they send a message inviting that student to have sex with them. And that element is going to be significant as we move through. So the history of Act 2010-264 for the automatic revocation, there's a story behind it. So we kind of informally refer to it in our office as the Fincher Law because it was sponsored by Representative Chad Fincher from Washington County. And so what happened in Washington County was that there was a teacher by the name of Charlene Schmitz. You may have heard the name. She ended up in the news. And what she ended up in the news for was that she was convicted. The federal charges had to do with her soliciting a student for sex. We also believe that she, in fact, did have sex with that student. But those state charges are still pending. But the federal charges, she went into prison for over 10 years. And it also resulted in her going on the predator list I referred to earlier. But because of some procedures that we needed to kind of tighten up, she ended up making $140,000 in salary while her case was pending. A couple of things that we learned from this case is, number one, that there are ways to go ahead and terminate someone while their criminal case is pending. So that was one element that we learned from this. So that was something that came about as a change that came about as because of this. But also, Mr. Fincher decided, or Representative Fincher, decided that that shouldn't happen. We shouldn't have someone still maintaining a certificate when they've been convicted of a crime where they will not be able to go into a school and certainly not be employed at the school. So he put together this law that says if you're convicted of these crimes that are listed, which I'm going to go over shortly, then you cannot continue your employment there. So this was very helpful to us because what we had to do before is to have an administrative case. We had to wait for the criminal case to be over with, and then we'd have the administrative case. We'd have to call witnesses that had already testified in the criminal case, and then after that, then the hearing officer would make a recommendation for revocation. So that just kind of drew out the process. And so what Representative Fincher allowed us to do is just kind of short-circuit all that. So the crimes that are included in this act are Class A felonies. That's things like rape, murder, kidnapping, robbery. But we also have included in this law things like the lesser included rape charges that are not Class A felonies, but maybe Class B or Class C: sodomy, sexual torture, sexual abuse, enticing a child to enter a vehicle for immoral purposes, promoting prostitution, a violation of the Child Pornography Act, kidnapping a minor, incest, transmitting obscene material, facilitating solicitation of an unlawful sexual conduct with a child, electronic solicitation of a child. Any crime committed in any jurisdiction, which if it's committed in another state, if it had been committed in this state, would constitute an offense listed previously. So in other words, if someone is convicted, let's just say in Tennessee, of one of those crimes, then this would apply as well. And any sex offense involving a child under the age of 12 or any offense involving child pornography falls under this. And if we have a crime that is committed in any jurisdiction with the same elements as those listed, it would fall under this. Finally, if there's any crime that's not listed that involves the endangerment to the health, safety, or welfare of a child that may be created on or after the effective date of this, that would also would be grounds for automatic revocation. And so that same year, that was when this law was passed that criminalized sexual relationships between students and teachers. And so this is for under the age of 19. So the law was sponsored by the late Senator Demetrius Newton. Unfortunately, he's passed away. And so, again, it criminalizes those in school employees having sex with students under the age of 19. So it's not just teachers. It can be any school employee. But I focus on teachers because of the certification element. And so it used to be that if you had a teacher and student who had sexual relations and that child was over the age of consent, which is 16 in Alabama, then that was not a crime, but it is now. In those particular cases that we had, sometimes it was difficult to have those hearings. Sometimes the victim did not want to participate. And so we had situations where we could try to present the evidence, but basically we had hearsay. So the different parts of this act. Part 1 is sexual acts or deviant sexual intercourse with the student. That's a Class B felony. Part 2 of it is sexual contact, which involves touching intimate areas for sexual gratification. And at one point, it was also soliciting or harassing a student to perform a sex act. And so this was a Class A misdemeanor and for both of those things. And so I'm going to explain the law that kind of changed that to kind of make it a little bit more reasonable. Because sexual contact with touching, that certainly is more serious than sending a message. So as a result of this law being passed, we've had a number of certificates that have been revoked. We've also had situations in criminal cases where the teacher has gone ahead and surrendered their certificate as part of their plea bargain with the criminal case. So there were changes that were made to this law, the School Employee Sex Act, and it was amended in 2016 to add volunteers, because up to that point they were not included. So we have had situations where a teacher had sex with a student and if there was no certification repercussions because they were a volunteer and weren't required to have a certificate. It clarified in 2016 that the law pertains to those who have contacts with students in their official capacity as school employees. So previously it was any student with a teacher, and there were some constitutional challenges. And one of the things that the court said was, well, where's the direct impact? So the law was changed to say, no, this is where it is that student's teacher, not just any teacher from, for instance, another school. And so the sexual contact part of this was made into a Class C felony. And then the solicitation part remained a misdemeanor. So that made the law a little bit more in line with what you would expect. But if we can avoid these occurrences, that's certainly what we want to do. And what we've seen over the years as we've had a number of these cases, we see that there's kind of a pattern that happens, and we can kind of predict based on what's occurring what will happen. So if we can stop this before it goes too far and the lives of the student and the teacher are ruined, that's what we really want to do. And that's really the purpose of this presentation, is to try to avoid these occurrences. An example of how this occurs is when the educator is having relationship problems at home. And so this is kind of a typical inappropriate relationship scenario. So they will have, and this isn't always the case, but oftentimes there will be some issues that are going on at home. And the student is what we used to call a latchkey kid. So they've got a lot of time on their own where there's no parental supervision. And so oftentimes, but not always, there's opportunities for the educator and the student to be alone together. So that could be situations where there's extracurricular activities going on, sports activities, it could be band, but it's not always the case, because what's happening is that we're seeing that as teachers and students text, that kind of creates that space together. And so they're alone, so to speak, because no one else is seeing that conversation. So it's not always teachers that have extracurricular activities. So then the next thing that happens is there's contact with the student that extends beyond the classroom. So that's the texting I was talking about. It can be telephone calls. It can be meeting up afterwards. And so often what will happen next is that there's personal contact occurring, then sometimes the sexual relationship will actually occur. Sometimes these relationships are discovered by the rumor mill, and sometimes it's by the parents reviewing text. It used to be you had those plans with the cell phone where there was a certain charge for so many texts, and then after that you got extra charges. Nowadays it's pretty much unlimited text. But back when that was happening, we saw a lot of situations where parents would look at the phones to see, well, why are you texting so much and why is there such a high bill? And then they would notice that there was text between the teacher and student.
Texting, video, and other social media tools are popular and engaging, and may be used as valuable instructional tools. They can help teachers and students make connections to ideas, skills, concepts, and technology-driven learning environments. Unfortunately, social media has also created an easy avenue for some teachers to cross boundaries using online communication. In Alabama, the number of violations stemming from social media interactions between educators and students has increased significantly.
Hey,
Hey, how was school today?
it's okay.
Just okay?
Well, my forensics class was good. Wait, Mom, I forgot my English folder in my locker. We have a huge vocabulary test tomorrow. I need it.
All right, well, hurry up.
I will. I got it, thanks.
What's going on here?
Why are you checking my phone? Mom, it's none of your business.
None of my business. You're my son. Now, what's going on with you and Miss Perry?
Nothing.
Nothing? I saw the pics that she sent you.
Mom, leave everything alone. You're just gonna mess everything up.
Mess everything up. Are you kidding me? I'm supposed to protect you. Miss Perry has crossed a very serious line here. I'm going to report this to your school principal, and then you and I are going to talk way more about this.
Mom, please, do not tell Dr. Garza.
This is serious. I have to report this.
Thank you for coming forward to report this information. I know how upsetting this must be for you to have discovered this. It is deeply disturbing to me as well to know that one of our teachers has engaged in this kind of serious misconduct. I want to assure you that a full investigation will be initiated immediately regarding Ms. Perry's actions. The text message evidence and the pictures you've shared will be very useful. I've notified the superintendent, and I've called our district resource officer to assist in the investigation.
Okay, well, thank you for addressing this, and I'll expect to hear from you soon.
Ms. Perry, please sit down. I believe you know our HR director, Ms. Sutton.
I do. Something wrong?
Yes. I've asked our HR director to be present for this meeting. She will serve as a witness and will document our meeting.
Not sure why you would need to document this meeting, but what's going on?
Ms. Perry, what is your relationship with your students?
Well, they're my students, and we're also friends.
Friends?
Oh, what I mean is I may help them out from time to time.
A student's mother just left our office. She was very upset. Do you know why she might be upset?
Oh, one of the students, he and I are friends, and we've been sort of horseplaying around, so maybe she's mad that I'm friends with her son.
And how have you been communicating with this student?
I've sent a couple of texts, but they've all been harmless. I may have played around a little bit, but I didn't do anything. I've sent some stuff, but I don't know what I'm saying. I don't want to say anything else.
Miss Perry, we have very strong evidence that you're involved in an extremely inappropriate relationship with that student. You are officially placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. You are not to have any contact with any student until further notice. You will receive further instructions from our school attorney. Our HR director will escort you from the building. You are not to return to your classroom.
He told me he was in love with me, but then he crushed me until I was a complete emotional wreck. He was obsessively possessive. I was completely under his thumb. I used to be this outgoing, strong, and independent teenager. He destroyed me.
He ruined me, sexually, emotionally, and in every other way possible. I was naive and innocent, and he was perverse. It was an aggressive and sickening physical relationship, but I was infatuated. He was this older man. All the girls liked him. I'll be honest, we were all after him, but it was still wrong. He was the teacher.
I literally believed I was worthless. I got into an unhealthy relationship and had problems with alcohol and self-harm issues. I wanted to die. I have tremendous regret and I feel a lot of guilt. She lost her job. Her husband divorced her. She lost her kids. People tell me it wasn't my fault. She was my teacher. I just feel like such a loser.
Unfortunately, these types of violations are happening all too often. They are life-changing for everyone involved. Experts and school officials state that these cases demonstrate how educators, parents, and students need to be more aware in order to prevent these situations from occurring in our schools. Districts must enforce strong policies concerning the use of social media and electronic communication. If you know a colleague is engaging in behavior that is unprofessional or unethical, report it immediately to your school administrator.
So, in addition to looking for those things I just talked about, an educator should always maintain professionalism in dealing with students. And that extends not just in sexual things, but any interactions with a student. Not discussing things that could be construed as insensitive to their race or their gender, not allowing the student to get the teacher's goat and to accelerate into a physical violence that sometimes occurs. But again, focusing back on the sexual relationships, the educator should also avoid sharing information about their personal life, because we found that a lot of times the way this grooming first starts is there is a teacher. Again, I've talked about how sometimes they're unhappy at home and they start sharing their information. That creates an intimacy between the teacher and the student. They do not need to go there. They need to keep that. They can talk with other adults about it, and they can talk with a professional about it, and they can talk with their spouse about it, but don't talk with students about it, because then the relationship starts changing. And one of the ways also to avoid that even occurring is that teachers should always try to maintain a good work-life balance. And I know some of y'all are probably laughing as I say that, but it really is important to do that. So other preventative measures. teachers should avoid being completely alone with students. We have had situations where teachers were falsely accused of an inappropriate relationship by a student who got upset by a bad grade or something else that had occurred, and so they falsely accused the teacher. And that's that's very preventable. So if you have students who are asking for rides home, if there's, first of all, try to find some other way instead of doing that. But if that's the only option, then bring another adult with you. Use the buddy system. Because one of the allegations involved something that supposedly occurred on a ride home. If the instructor needs to communicate with students via text, he should send a group text. He or she should send a group text and avoid individualized messages, or use an app such as Remind, where there's not going to be this back and forth. There's Facebook groups you can do, but the important thing is just to avoid one-on-one conversations, because again, it creates this false sense of intimacy, but also it creates a situation where a communication can occur that, because it is just between the two, someone can misconstrue what happened if they don't keep a copy of the text. They can say, well, he or she told me this, when in fact that wasn't what occurred. But also be careful with Facebook and any social media. Be careful about friending students. When I've done this presentation before, I've had teachers come up to me and tell me, says, well, I just have a policy that I just don't do that at all. And I think that's a great policy. The problem with it is, again, it creates that false sense of intimacy, but again, it creates an opportunity for those one-on-one communications that can sometimes go into an area that they don't need to be going into. I've included a link, and I will also upload this to the website with all the mega materials, but it is a guide for using Facebook. And it has some good things in there, not only pertaining to students, but also pertaining to professional interactions, because sometimes we've had situations where teachers have expressed some opinions about school and their principal and so forth on social media, and ended up getting in trouble for that. So even if we don't pursue certification action based on it, you don't want to get in trouble for something that could have been avoided. So there's ways to do that to avoid those occurrences.
Educator ethics violations are increasing each year in our public schools at alarming rates. This video will focus on the responsibility of all educators to confront and report the behavior. What is your responsibility to confront or report a possible violation? While it may be difficult to report the inappropriate actions of a fellow educator, doing so is necessary to protect the safety of all our students.
Mr. Meyer, you're always on that phone. What are you doing?
I'm just checking my Facebook. Always an interesting read.
Who has time for Facebook?
Yeah, I like it. It's a good way to stay in touch and chronicle my life. Kind of like a digital scrapbook.
Chronicling your life, huh? You know, as a teacher, that'll get you into trouble. Seen it happen before.
So, Miss Gonzalez, you on Facebook?
Yes, but I don't have a lot of time to spend on Facebook or anything else.
Well, you're way out of touch. What you need is Snapchat. There's also Instagram, Tumblr, 4chan, and Kick. I'm sending you, Miss Gonzalez, a friend request right now. See you online, doll.
You have a great day. Oh my goodness, Mr. Meyer really did send me a friend request. Wow. This is totally inappropriate. I can't believe he's actually friends with students and they're leaving comments on his pictures. And what is he smoking in that photo? I'm gonna have to report this.
Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Mr. Meyer, please, sit down. I'd like to talk to you about social media. How do you use social media for your instructional needs?
Well, I don't really use social media for my instructional lessons. I will send the occasional text reminder for a missing assignment, but that's the extent of it.
What about Facebook? Do you connect with students on Facebook?
Well, no, yeah, sure. I like to friend them and let them know I care. I really want to build those personal relationships and connections so they'll trust me and want to learn in my class.
Mr. Meyer, are you aware of our district policy on social media?
No. I mean, I really haven't done anything wrong. What is the policy?
It is in the staffed handbook that you received in the beginning of the school year. It provides guidance on expectations for social media utilization. Mr. Meyer, several pictures on your Facebook account show you drinking, vomiting, smoking, as well as several other inappropriate posts. You are also communicating with several of the female students in a way that is definitely blurring the lines between what is okay and what is not okay.
Well, yeah, but that's my personal life. I don't say that was any of your business. I mean, I say that respectfully. Aren't I supposed to have a personal life?
Mr. Meyer, you don't stop being a teacher at 4 p.m. Students look up to teachers and consider them role models and mentors. Your behavior shown in these Facebook pictures does not reflect the behavior of a positive role model or mentor.
I just don't understand. It's my personal life.
The manner in which you are communicating and the frequency of your communications is a direct violation of our district policy. There are serious consequences that arise from the type of behavior that you've demonstrated on the social media platform.
So even Snapchat, where the posts are temporary?
Mr. Meyer, nothing is only temporary. The images you send on Snapchat are not only briefly stored on the servers at Snapchat, they're often stored on your phone's temporary files. That means that anyone can come grab your photos even if you thought they were gone forever. Furthermore, sir, I'm very concerned with your inability to understand what is expected of you. No contact with students on social media whatsoever. Am I being clear enough?
Instagram?
You're still having difficulty understanding my verbal directive. You will receive within 24 hours a formal reprimand documenting this conference. You need to understand that possible termination will occur should you decide to go against my directive and continue to have social media contact or any other inappropriate contact with any current or former students. An outcome of this investigation will be forthcoming. Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Have a good day.
I felt like it wasn't my place to report my colleague, but in hindsight, I could have possibly changed what happened. A kid was hurt, and that is something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life.
He was my friend, and I suspected something was happening, but I didn't want to confront it. I wanted it to be just a rumor. He has ruined his life and possibly the life of a student.
I know that other teachers knew what was going on. They all protected each other. I needed someone to step in and help me. I felt alone and horrible. I didn't know how to stop it before it got out of hand. I thought teachers were supposed to take care of us.
So, additional preventative measures ensure that any investigation of educator-student sexual relationships are reported to law enforcement and DHR as soon as possible. As you know, there's a mandatory reporting. And what that does is, in addition to satisfying that requirement, they can go ahead and conduct an investigation, and they will know how to do the proper questioning. They can secure the phone, and even if the messages have been deleted, there are often ways for forensic searches to go ahead and get that information back off the phone. So all of that needs to be secured as soon as possible. So law enforcement or DHR will know how to do that. Also, check out your acceptable use policies. Make sure those are up to date. Make sure all the educators have signed off on that. Because sometimes these communications occur on school-issued laptops, school-issued phones, and so having that on hand, even if it turns out that it didn't get to the point of quote-unquote sexting, sometimes those communications can just be inappropriate. And so by having that acceptable use policy, you can address that issue. Also document the training and maintain awareness. So one of the ways that we can do trainings, things like what I'm talking about right now, but we have an Educator Ethics program through the department. And so it is on our website, and we'll provide the link with the mega materials. But it has training materials for school staff to use. It has scenarios that are acted out by professional actors. It also has PowerPoints, and it has handouts. And so all of this can be done at the school as the annual training. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached at the department. My number is 334-694-4699. And I'm more than happy to help you work through that and to do the training. And what this training is designed to do is to prevent these occurrences through raising awareness. As I pointed out earlier, these situations usually follow a particular pattern. So there's things that maybe by themselves that it might kind of be concerning, but you may think, oh, well, okay, so that teacher's a little kind of friendly with the students. I guess I should mind my own business. But oftentimes those are signs of the grooming process. So these videos in particular help show what that looks like. And if you see something that has happened that doesn't look right, go ahead and let someone know, or at the minimum, talk to that particular teacher and explain to them your concerns and why you're concerned, because you may help them to not go down a path that they don't need to go down. And so this is important so that we can go ahead and open a file and go ahead and start looking into this and see if certification action is appropriate. Also, sometimes we can help the school system in kind of providing resources to help that case along. So if there's issues they're running into for whatever reason at the local level, then we can kind of teamwork on this. But there's also the fact that if it's not reported under our administrative code, that is actually grounds for us taking action against that local superintendent. So it's very important that this is reported to us and that we can look into it. If it turns out after your investigation that there is nothing to it at the local level, just let us know that so that we can take that, into consideration as we review what we've received. But I just want to make sure that school systems are aware of this. This has to be done within 10 days, because sometimes we will find when something hasn't been reported, they said, well, I didn't realize that was a requirement. Again, it's in the administrative code, but I just want to make sure that you're aware of it. So examples of misconduct that require reporting. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list, because anytime that there is employment action taken as a result of an allegation of misconduct, really we should be notified of it. And so those allegations can include sexting, expressions of romantic love, maltreatment of a student, illegal drug use. Now, this is getting to things outside of the sex stuff, but property crimes, cheating on standardized student assessments. All of these things are things that we have taken action against certificates for in the past. And so, again, this is not an all-inclusive list. Now let me say this, if there is something where there's been employment action taken and you're not sure if it rises to the level of reporting to us, like I said, it's supposed to be done in all circumstances, but if you have any question about that, please reach out to us so that we can discuss it and make sure that you're fulfilling the reporting requirements. So where do you report this? You can send it to me or to James Ward. He is my fellow prosecutor in the department. Corey Martin, who is the assistant coordinator for background review in our certification office, he is someone that this can be reported to as well. And we've got our phone number on the PowerPoint for their office. And again, the number for legal is 694-4699. So at this point, if you have any questions, please send those to me. Again, my email is in the PowerPoint, and I will be happy to address those. One of the bad things about not presenting in person is that I can't talk with you right then and answer the questions. I know some of the things that I've been asked in the past are things about particular ways of communicating with students that would be helpful. That's why I included the Remind app, but there's other apps out there. There's ways to get messages out to students without having one-on-one texting. Another question that I often get is, does this really happen? Unfortunately, it does. This is actually occurring in our schools. And I don't think that in a lot of these cases it's situations where the teacher sets out to do that. I think that they find themselves in a situation where they've just gone too far down the road. And what they should have done at the very beginning was to always maintain that professionalism with the student. And I've had situations where they've asked us, well, what about when a student is throwing themselves at a teacher? And that does occur. Again, maintain that professionalism and ensure that those professional boundaries are in place at all times. If you do that, then that helps to prevent these occurrences from happening. So, again, keep it professional in the communications and the interactions. Follow these materials. I would say that it would be good to go over these every year at school systems to get a reminder about this. That's currently not a requirement, but I do recommend it. And again, if there's any questions about how to prevent these situations, please reach out, because I'm here to help. And I want to see these incidents go down, because I don't want Alabama to continue to be the leader in this. There's lots of other things that Alabama leads the nation in that are very positive things, but this is something that we need to turn around. Thank you.